here we go. So clip 52, grade D. Right. We have to now work out these questions without using a calculator. Can you please actually put the lids on your calculator, close them so I can physically see they're closed now. Everybody put your calculators, put the lids on them, so I can see them right in front of you. The lids are being closed. So I don't want anybody using calculator for this. You do not need to use a calculator at all. Now, let's have a look at what these kind of questions mean. If you want to work out 10%, 10% means, let's just have a quick look. 10% means 10 out of 100, and 10 divided by 100 cancels down to 1/10. How do we work out 1/10? By simply dividing by 10. So we have 170. If we divide it by 10, we remove the 0 at the end. So the final answer becomes 17. Nice and straightforward. 10% of 6,800. We're going to divide this by 10 as well. So 6,800 divided by 10. What do we do? 0 at the end. We remove it. And we get 68. Okay, now, the questions change a bit here. I mean, because we got now a whole number without a 0 that we can remove. What do we do instead? Put a decimal point at the end and move it one place back. So the final answer will become, so that one will be what? £92 and 30. And 10% of £16, put the decimal point at the end, move one place back. So the final answer will be £1.60. Put an extra 0 on, folks, because it makes it look better. It's decimal money, after all. Okay, that's 10%. 10% is one of the easiest things in the world to do, folks, in the examination with that calculator. Easiest thing in the world. Okay, that's if you can get yourself up in the morning. After that, it's easy. Okay, right. I'm going to rub that off. I'm going to make the next part a bit bigger. So, clear that. Let's expand it a bit. Okay, let's go back to mouse. Expand. Whoa, that's nice and big. Hassan, are you with me?
Yes.
You know what we're doing?
Yeah.
You sure you know what you're doing? Oh, that's beautiful. I like that. That's nice. Okay, let's get back to this now. Now it goes work out 20%. Now, if we know how to work out 10%, how do we get from 10% to 20%? Just double it. So 10% of 60 is what?
6.
So 10% of 60 is going to be equal to 6. So we remove the 0, divide by 10. Now I want to get to 20%. I just double the 10%. So times everything by 2. So I get 20% is equal to 12. Or you could just simply add another 6. So that's how we'll get to 20% after knowing how to do 10%. Now let's have a look at how we work out 30%. With 30%, the technique is, first of all, we start off with how much percent? 10%. So we do 10% of 90. 10% of 90 divided by 10, that will give you what? 9. The next bit, I want to get from 10% to 30%, Abdullah. What's the procedure? Times by 3. So you times that by 3 as well. So 10 times by 3 will give you the 30%. If you times the left hand side by 3, you got to times the right hand side by 3, and that gives you £27. Okay, now the next one is 15% of 800. Let's see who's got the idea for that. Okay, 15%. Let's start with the Faisal. Faisal, 15% of 800. Give me the technique, please. Only just the technique. We start off with 10%. So we work out 10% of 800 and we divide it by 10. That will give us an answer of 80. Well done. Okay, now how do we get to 15%? What do we do next? We divide 10% by 2, and that will give us 5%. So 10%, if we divide it by 2, oops, so 2 is supposed to be here. Oops, sorry about that, folks. Wait up. Do you like this there? Divided by 2, it will give us 5%. And how do we get to 15 then? Add them up. Just add them up. Easier. You regard the 10, you regard the 5. Just add these up. So 80 I want to get to, so we divide this side by 2, we divide this side by 2. So 80 divided by 2, Hassan gives me what?
80 divided by 40.
That gives you 40, that's your 5% equivalent, that's your 10% equivalent. And then what we do, we add them up. We add everything up. 10 add 5 is 15 on the left hand side. So 10 add 5 is 15 here. Then we do 80 add 40 on this side. That'll give us what?
120 pounds.
120 pounds. So what we do, we're working our percentages using number bonds. Okay, now, there's one question over here, 15% of 68. Okay, right. Let's clear the page because we're running out of space. So we're going to work out first of all 10%. So 10% of 68. Here's 68. Put the decimal point in the end and move it back by one place gives you 6.8. So 10% is 6.8. Now I need to work out a further 5%. 5 is half of 10. So you halve the 6.8. Don't feel scared of decimals, folks. You will get decimals in the exam. 6.8 divided by 2 will give us, as Abdullah just said, 3.4. Well done, Abdullah. And to get the 15%, what do we do now with these two values? Add them up. Add these up. So that'll give us 15% over here. And then 8.4, that'll give you the 12. So 6 at 3 is 9, and the 1 is that. And because it's decimal money, put the pound sign here and add an extra 0 for good measure. Done. Okay, so everybody copy that down. That's the technique you need to show the examiner on the non-calculated paper. That's how you broke the question down and worked out. So now, are we happy with that? Is it good? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Has everybody copy that down yet? Okay, alright. The next questions. Work out 35%. Okay, of £80. Again, these are all non-calculated questions now. Samara, what is your idea? All I want is the idea. How do we work out 35% by breaking the 35 down? What would you work out first? 10%. And from 10%, what we can do, we can double the 10% to give us 20%. And how much do you have altogether now? And then we can halve the 10% to give us 5%. That gives a total of 35%. We're done in 3 steps. Okay, let's. So, we started with 80. Let's work out 10%. Divide 80 by 10. It gives us what? So 10% is 8. 20% is double of 10. So double of 8 is 16. 5% is half of 10%. So what's half of 8? Add them all up. That'll give us what?
28.
Okay, let's quickly put on the side how we done that. So 10% we divided by 10 first of all with the original calculation divided by 10. And then we double it. And then we halved it. And what we done on the left hand side, we done on the, so it's like a ratio style question. And then what we do at the end of all that, what do you have to do to get the final answer? We have to add them. Done. Okay, 90%, what's the technique for 90%? Work out 10% and multiply it by 9. We can leave that one for the moment. Let's move on to C and D. These are nice questions, right? 17.5%, you might think this is going to be really hard. So we're going to do this question here now, C. So to work out 17.5%, Hassan, give me some ideas, please, Hassan.
First you work out 10%.
First of all, we work out 10%. And then after we work out 10%, we work out
5%.
And then after we work out 5%, we work out
2.5%.
2.5%. Lovely. Now tell me, how do we do these? So to work out 10% of the 600.
60.
Okay, what do we do 10%? How do we do that? To work out 10%, we divide by 10. We divide by 10 by removing here 1. 0. That gives us 60. How do we get from 10% to 5%? Halve it. If you halve it on the left hand side, we got to halve it on the right. This is non-calculated technique, folks. 60 divided by 2 will give us then 30. Yeah. Now, Ruqayya, from 5% to 2.5%, what do we do? Divided by 2 again. So you do 30 divided by 2 on this side. Okay. Okay. Right. And then we add them all up. Now 10% at 5% at 2.5% gives us what we need in the question. 17.5%. If you add all these ones up, 60 at 30 at 50 will give us. Will give us, folks? 60 at 30 at 15 will give us 105. Oh, some wild answers here. Okay, £105. Is that question done?
Yeah.
Okay, now I want everybody in the class to do question part D while I pause the video. Everybody do part D. Right. Okay, this was the class of questions. Set 17.5% of 8s. 850. Mr. Hassan's volunteered himself to start us off. So we're going to start off with what percent, Hassan?
10%.
And then?
5%.
And then?
2.5.
This is the number bonds of 17.5, folks, okay? So they give you 17.5, you can work out nicely. So 10% of 850, we have to divide it by 10, so that gives us 85. And then we've got to work out 5%, which is half of 10%. So if you half 10, you get 5, half 85, you get, what's half of 85?
42.5.
Okay, now. Okay, right. Okay. This one is divided by 2. This one is divided by 2. So we're going to divide this one by 2. Okay. Mr. Faisal, have you done it?
Yeah.
Do you understand it? Okay. So 42.5, if we divide it by 2, that will give us an answer. What's half of 42.5? 21 point. Okay, now, what do we do with all these values now? Add them all up. So 10 at 5 at 2.5 will give us, is what we need, 17.5%. Which is same as 17.5. Same thing. And then, you've got to add up all these and make sure you don't make a mistake with the decimal. So we got here 85.00. So what's on the end? 5 and on, yeah? And then what do we have next? 7, good. And then?
8.8.
Then 8, and then another one?
4.1.
So we get 148.75. Excellent answer. That is absolutely correct. So 148.75 is the answer. 148.75. Okay, folks? Can we see that nice and clearly? Yeah, indeed.